Lieutenant Avery Monroe stepped off the military transport, the cold wind slicing through her jacket like a knife. The dawn sky was streaked with gray and orange, but the beauty of the sunrise did nothing to soften the sting of the early morning chill. Her boots hit the concrete with a sharp echo that bounced off the empty barracks and training buildings. She paused for a moment, inhaling the crisp air, letting it fill her lungs. This was her first day at the elite tactical training facility, a place where the country sent only its best, where reputations were forged in fire and blood, and where newcomers were tested ruthlessly. As she walked toward the main gate, whispers followed her. Some eyes were skeptical, some curious, and some openly mocking. Word of Avery's arrival had preceded her, the top marksman of her graduating class, a woman with an almost mythical reputation for precision and calm under pressure. But fame meant nothing here. Respect had to be earned with every shot, every calculated movement, every split-second decision under pressure. Sergeant Blake, a cocky rookie with a reputation for tearing others down to lift himself up, lounged near the entrance with his rifle slung casually over his shoulder. When he spotted Avery, a mocking grin spread across his face. "Well, look who's here," he called out, loud enough for nearby soldiers to hear. "Hope you can hit more than a trash can at 50 feet. He let out a laugh that was more sneer than humor. Avery didn't flinch. She didn't even glance at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the path ahead. She didn't need to respond. The calm confidence in her posture said everything she needed to. Blake's smirk faltered slightly when he noticed it. He had mocked plenty of soldiers before, but something about Avery unsettled him. There was no arrogance, no desperation to prove herself. There was only quiet, unshakable focus. She passed through the main gate and entered the barracks. The interior smelled faintly of gun oil and polished floors, the faint hum of early morning activity filling the air. Soldiers bustled about, preparing their gear for the day, and Avery noted every glance that lingered on her. Some were hostile, some admiring, and some calculating, figuring out where she fit in this rigid hierarchy. Avery approached her assigned locker, neatly placing her rifle bag and gear down with careful precision. Every movement was deliberate. She unpacked her rifle, checking the scope, the barrel, and the trigger with methodical thoroughness. Every soldier here was trained to respect weapons, but Avery's attention to detail was on another level. It was an unspoken message. She was ready, and nothing would catch her off guard. Outside, the sound of the whistle blew across the training range. The first drill of the day was about to begin, and soldiers scrambled to their positions. Blake was already at the line, tossing his rifle up and catching it with exaggerated flair, trying to draw attention to himself. Avery approached the line steadily, her boots silent against the gravel. The wind tugged at her hair, and the early sun glinted off the metal of the rifles and targets. Blake went first. His movements were fast, almost reckless, as if trying to prove a point before the drill even began. The first target popped up at 50 yards. Blake fired rapidly, but his shots were scattered. One bullet hit the outer edge, another missed completely. His smirk vanished as he realized the drill was tougher than he anticipated. He muttered under his breath, frustration creeping into his voice. Avery took her position. The wind tugged at her jacket, but she didn't flinch. She placed her feet, adjusted her stance, and breathed in slowly. She could feel the tension in the air, the silent judgment of every soldier nearby, the weight of expectation, and the sting of Blake's earlier mockery. And yet she was calm. More than calm, focused, almost serene. Her hand rested on the rifle, fingers gentle but firm on the trigger. The target rose again. Avery exhaled slowly, letting the barrel find the perfect alignment. She squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the range, sharp and precise. Bulls! A faint ripple of murmurs ran through the watching soldiers. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others looked at each other with growing respect. Avery didn't react. She didn't need to. The rifle had spoken for her. The next target appeared, moving now, popping up unpredictably. Most soldiers would have flinched, struggled to adapt. Avery adjusted instantly. She measured the wind, gauged the distance, anticipated the target's path. Another shot rang out, dead center. The murmurs grew louder, whispers of how is she doing that, and she can't be real. Blake's face went pale. He had expected to be the center of attention, the star of the drill, the one everyone would remember. Instead, he was a footnote, humiliated silently as Avery continued to dominate the targets with flawless precision. His fingers trembled slightly on the rifle. He fired another round, miss. Avery's next shot hit perfectly again. By now, every soldier on the range was watching Avery like a hawk. Her movements were fluid, almost artistic, every shot calculated and exact. The wind, the light, the unpredictable angles, she handled it all with an almost unnatural grace. And yet, beneath that calm surface, her mind raced. Every movement, every shot, every target was part of a strategy she had built over years of training. This wasn't about proving Blake wrong. This was about proving to herself that nothing could unseat her focus. Finally, the whistle blew for the last round. Avery exhaled one final time, steadying her breathing, and fired. Every target had been eliminated. Dead center, perfect execution. The range fell silent except for the echo of the last shot. Soldiers exchanged glances. Even the drill sergeant, known for his stoicism, raised an eyebrow in approval. Blake's jaw dropped. The rookie who had mocked her had been utterly destroyed, silently, efficiently, and without a word. Avery packed her rifle slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving the ground ahead. She walked away, calm, confident, and unshaken. But even as she left the range, she felt the undercurrent of something brewing, a storm that was waiting for her beyond the drills and targets. In the barracks later, whispers continued. Some were filled with awe, others with disbelief, and a few with envy. Avery sat quietly at her corner table, unpacking her gear methodically. She knew this was only the beginning. The mockery she had faced was a warm-up. There were bigger challenges ahead, hidden rivalries, subtle sabotage, and the constant need to prove herself in a world where every mistake could be costly. As the sun climbed higher, Avery looked out the window toward the training fields. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of gunpowder and earth. Somewhere, Blake was plotting, soldiers were talking, and unseen eyes were watching. Avery knew that the first day had been a victory, yes, but the real test had only just begun, and when it came, she would be ready. Even as the barracks hummed with activity, one thought echoed in her mind. Precision was her weapon, calm was her shield, and nothing, not mockery, not sabotage, not fear, would break her. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, someone was already taking note. The storm was coming, and Avery Monroe was ready. The sun had fully risen, casting a harsh glare over the training grounds. The concrete seemed to shimmer with heat, and the wind carried a faint scent of dust and gunpowder. Lieutenant Avery Monroe stood at the firing line, her rifle balanced perfectly against her shoulder, eyes scanning the targets that would appear without warning. Every soldier around her was tense, gripping their weapons tightly, sweat forming at the nape of their necks despite the morning chill. Today's drill was designed to separate the good from the exceptional, and Avery knew the stakes were higher than they appeared. Sergeant Blake, still smarting from his earlier humiliation, approached the line with a forced swagger. He whispered to a few nearby soldiers, trying to make them laugh at Avery's performance, but the laughter sounded hollow, betraying his unease. Avery ignored him, her focus absolute. She had learned long ago that energy wasted on distractions was energy lost in execution. The whistle blew, signaling the start of the drill. The first target appeared, a metal plate at 50 yards rocking slightly in the breeze. Soldiers fired quickly, some hitting, some missing, others trembling under pressure. Avery's first shot was calm, deliberate, precise. The bullet struck the center with a sharp, ringing impact. She didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The second target appeared, moving faster now, darting side to side. Most soldiers reacted too slowly. Blake fumbled, his rifle jerking as he tried to compensate. Avery's eyes tracked the target effortlessly, adjusting her aim, and the shot rang true. Another perfect hit. Whispers rippled along the firing line. She's unreal. How does she do that? It's like she sees the bullet before it leaves the barrel. But Avery didn't allow herself satisfaction. Each success was simply the next step in the drill. Her mind raced with calculations, wind, distance, motion, timing, all feeding into a single point of execution. She felt a thrill, but it wasn't ego. It was control. The drill escalated. Targets appeared in rapid succession, some emerging from behind barriers, some swinging on ropes, others spinning unpredictably. Avery's breathing remained steady. Her hands didn't tremble. One by one, her shots hit the mark, clean, sharp, perfect. She could hear Blake cursing under his breath as his own shots missed or glanced off the edge of the targets. The realization on his face was unmistakable. He had underestimated her. By the halfway mark, the tension was palpable. Soldiers were sweating, their foreheads glistening under the sun, their nerves frayed. Avery, however, seemed untouchable, almost otherworldly in her precision. She adjusted her scope, her eyes narrowing slightly as the next target popped up at an awkward angle. The others hesitated, unsure of the trajectory. Avery didn't hesitate. Her shot split the center of the plate. Another perfect hit. Blake's frustration boiled over. He slammed his rifle against the bench, drawing sharp eyes from the drill sergeant. "Beginner's luck," he shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. The words sounded hollow even to him. Avery simply raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. Luck didn't explain what the others were witnessing. Luck didn't eliminate every moving target without a single error. The final sequence was announced. The whistle blew again, louder this time, echoing across the range like a warning. The targets appeared almost simultaneously, some moving, some hidden, some appearing for only a split second before vanishing. Soldiers panicked, their shots flying haphazardly, their aim faltering under pressure. Avery exhaled, feeling the rhythm of the drill, feeling the pulse of the challenge. Her body was in perfect sync with her mind. She adjusted her stance, aimed, and fired. One by one, the targets fell. The last target popped up, small and distant, swaying in the wind. Blake's eyes were wide, his hands shaking as he prepared to fire. Avery's finger hovered on the trigger. She focused, tuning out everything else. The wind, the sun, the whispers, even Blake's glare. The bullet left the barrel in perfect alignment, hitting the tiny target dead center. Silence fell, thick and electric. The other soldiers stared, mouths agape, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Blake, humiliated and shaking, turned away, his face a mask of anger and disbelief. The drill sergeant's eyes were wide, a rare spark of admiration breaking through his usual stoicism. "Monroe," he said, his voice low but firm, "you've set the bar, perfect execution." Avery packed her rifle slowly, deliberately, her eyes scanning the line of soldiers who now regarded her with a mix of awe, fear, and envy. There was no celebration, no overt triumph, just quiet, deliberate confidence. She had proven herself in the drill, yes, but she knew that respect was only one battle. The true war was just beginning. Later in the barracks, the whispers persisted. Soldiers debated her skill in hushed tones, some unwilling to admit that she had outperformed everyone with apparent ease. Blake avoided her gaze, slumping into a corner, muttering complaints that no one else paid attention to. Avery, meanwhile, methodically cleaned and stored her rifle, each movement precise, each motion deliberate. Her mind, however, was elsewhere. She had noticed subtle signs during the drill, small tampering on targets, odd timing of the moving plates, irregularities that could have thrown her off. Someone had tried to challenge her beyond the rules of the exercise. Avery's eyes narrowed as she considered the possibilities. This base, she realized, wasn't just a place for training. It was a crucible designed to test not just skill, but resilience, cunning, and mental fortitude. By mid-afternoon, Avery walked outside to the perimeter, surveying the training grounds. Soldiers were exhausted, rifles slung over their shoulders, but she felt a calm energy coursing through her. She wasn't fatigued, she was alert. Every detail mattered. Every movement could be a clue. Someone had tried to destabilize her subtly, and she would find out who. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Blake's voice behind her. "You think you're untouchable," he spat, walking too close for comfort. Avery turned slowly, her gaze icy but controlled. "Not untouchable," she said, "just prepared." Blake scowled, realizing that her calm composure wasn't arrogance, it was strength. A faint tremor in his hand betrayed him. Avery could almost feel the storm brewing beneath his surface, and she understood that the mockery wasn't over. It was evolving. As the sun began to dip low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the training grounds, Avery walked back to her barracks. Her boots crunched against the gravel, each step measured, deliberate, as if she were marking territory with every move. Somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes tracked her. Someone was watching, waiting. Someone who wanted her to fail, or perhaps to test her further. Avery's heartbeat remained steady, her breathing calm. She had conquered the drill, silenced the mockery, and outperformed every soldier on that line. But she knew instinctively that this was just the beginning. The base was a living organism, full of hidden rivalries, subtle sabotage, and unspoken challenges. Every glance, every whisper, every action carried meaning, and Avery Monroe had learned to read them all. As night fell and the barracks lights flickered on, Avery sat quietly at her desk, rifle cleaned and stored, gear organized with methodical care. Outside, the wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying with it the faint scent of gunpowder and earth. Avery closed her eyes for a brief moment and imagined the drills of tomorrow. She knew the challenges would escalate, the stakes would rise, and the mockery she had endured would evolve into something more calculated. And somewhere in the shadows, waiting, watching, the first real threat to her dominance was already moving into position. Avery Monroe didn't flinch. She was ready. The storm had begun. The barracks buzzed with quiet speculation. Soldiers gathered in small clusters, whispering under their breath, casting occasional glances toward Lieutenant Avery Monroe. Her performance on the morning drill had sent shockwaves through the ranks. She had eliminated every target with perfect precision while the rest struggled to hit half. Some soldiers stared openly, unable to hide their awe. Others muttered bitterly under their breath, unwilling to admit what they had just witnessed. Blake lingered in the corner, his shoulders slumped, jaw tight with frustration and humiliation. He avoided Avery's gaze, but every so often his eyes flicked toward her, burning with jealousy and resentment. He had mocked her first, confident in his own skill, and now he was forced to swallow the bitter truth. He had been bested by someone he had underestimated. The mess hall smelled faintly of reheated coffee and scrambled eggs, but Avery didn't notice. She sat quietly at a corner table, her rifle bag placed neatly beside her, watching the room with calm detachment. She had no intention of engaging in gossip or defending her reputation. Her actions had already spoken louder than any words could. A group of younger soldiers approached hesitantly. "Lieutenant Monroe," one whispered, How did you do that? Every target just perfect." Avery gave a faint smile, the slightest lift at the corner of her lips. "Practice, focus, patience," she replied simply. Her tone carried no arrogance, only clarity. The words seemed almost mundane, but to those who had witnessed the drill, they resonated. Excellence was not a matter of luck. It was cultivated, disciplined, and precise. Blake's footsteps echoed behind her suddenly. "You got lucky," he spat, leaning on the table next to her, trying to intimidate. His voice carried a forced confidence, but Avery could sense the cracks beneath it. She met his gaze calmly. "Luck doesn't hit every target," she said softly, her tone almost a whisper, yet it cut through the tension like a blade. Blake glared but had no retort. He turned abruptly, muttering to himself as he walked away. Avery returned her focus to her gear. Every rifle, every scope, every bullet mattered. Today's drill was over, but tomorrow's challenges loomed, and she knew the importance of preparation. Later, the drill sergeant approached her, his usually impassive face unreadable. He gestured toward a quieter hallway, and Avery followed without hesitation. "Monroe," he said once they were alone, "you've got skill, beyond anything I've seen in this facility, but talent alone won't protect you. People here will try to undermine you. They'll mock, sabotage, and challenge you at every turn. You need to be ready, not just to shoot, but to anticipate." Avery nodded, She had expected as much. This place was not merely a training ground, it was a proving arena. Every soldier here carried ambition, pride, and ego. Her performance had disrupted the established hierarchy. Some would admire her, others would resent her. Some would quietly wait for a moment to strike. As she returned to her quarters, Avery considered the unspoken threats. The subtle glances, the whispering soldiers, even Blake's bitter glare. These were all signals. Someone would try to break her confidence, test her limits, and see if she could endure under pressure beyond the drills. She knew instinctively that the next battle would be as much psychological as it was physical. That evening she cleaned her rifle meticulously. Each part was examined and polished, the barrel aligned with precision, every screw and bolt tightened perfectly. Her actions were deliberate, almost ritualistic. As her hands moved, she replayed the day's drill in her mind, noting minor variables she could improve on: wind, angle, timing. The perfection of her shots today had been flawless, but tomorrow conditions could change, and she needed to be ready for anything. A quiet knock at the door broke her concentration. She looked up to see one of the younger soldiers, a trainee who had watched her closely all morning. "Lieutenant, congratulations," he stammered. "I've never seen anyone handle a drill like that. You make it look easy." Avery inclined her head slightly, acknowledging him without a word. Her mind, however, was already moving forward, calculating, strategizing. Praise and recognition were fleeting, preparation was eternal. Night settled over the base like a velvet cloak, shadows stretching long across the floors. Avery couldn't shake a feeling that someone was watching her, not physically but psychologically. A presence she could sense in the patterns of glances, the shifts in energy around the barracks. She had survived the drill, but the social battlefield had only begun. Blake was not the only one who would challenge her. In this environment, subtle rivalries simmered beneath the surface, and the facility was filled with soldiers whose pride had been wounded by her perfection. Every minor mistake, every hesitation, every slip could be exploited. Avery's awareness sharpened. She would anticipate these moves, counter them before they could take root. As she prepared for bed, she went over her mental checklist: gear, rifles, ammunition, sight alignment, angles, timing. Every detail mattered. The quiet hum of the base at night was deceptive. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, carrying the faint scent of gunpowder and metal. Somewhere in the shadows, a plan was being formed. Someone was observing her performance, marking her habits, testing her weaknesses. Avery lay on her bunk, eyes open, thinking. The physical drill had been won, but the real test was social, mental, and emotional. She was an anomaly, a female marksman at the top of her class in a place built to challenge the best men. That combination of skill and circumstance made her a target. She wasn't naive, she had faced mockery before. But now it was more than ridicule. There was calculation, subtle hostility, a need for some to see her fail. A knock on her door jolted her from her thoughts. No one answered when she called out. She stood, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. Footsteps echoed faintly, disappearing around the corner. Avery smiled faintly. The game had begun. It was no longer just about hitting targets. It was about anticipation, awareness, and control, and she was ready. She returned to her bunk, laying out her rifle beside her. Her breathing was calm, measured, almost meditative. She closed her eyes briefly, visualizing every target from today's drill, imagining angles and wind shifts. Then she opened her eyes, sharp and alert. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, faster targets, trickier conditions, and unseen opponents. And somewhere in the base, eyes were following her every move, calculating when to strike. The storm of rivalry, sabotage, and hidden challenges had begun. Avery Monroe had won today's drill, but tomorrow the real battle would start, and she would be ready to meet it head-on. The tension hung in the air like thick fog. The shadows in the barracks seemed deeper, the whispers louder, the glances sharper. Avery knew one thing for certain: victory wasn't just about skill, it was about control, and she intended to maintain it. Somewhere hidden, someone made a note in a notebook. She's extraordinary, but we'll see how long she lasts. Avery didn't hear it. She didn't need to. She could feel the challenge coming, and she welcomed it. The base had awakened to her presence, and now the real game was beginning. The morning sun had barely risen when Avery Monroe noticed something was off. Her weapons locker, which she had meticulously organized the night before, was slightly ajar. At first, she thought she had left it unsecured, but a closer inspection revealed a subtle but unmistakable sign. Someone had tampered with it. Ammunition was missing, and the alignment on her rifle's scope had been shifted just enough to make the next drill dangerous. A chill ran down her spine, not from fear, but from the awareness that someone at the base had singled her out. The skill she had displayed yesterday had not gone unnoticed, and envy had already begun to fester. Avery's calm demeanor remained intact, but her mind raced. She considered every possibility. Who could have done this? Blake, another soldier she had outperformed, or someone higher up testing her subtly. She didn't confront anyone directly. Avery knew better than to make assumptions in a place like this. Instead, she closed her locker, recalibrated her rifle with meticulous precision, and checked each piece of equipment twice. Every nut, every bolt, every part of the scope had to be perfect. The smallest misalignment could cost her in the next drill, and she refused to let sabotage dictate her performance. As she walked toward the training range, she scanned the grounds with sharp, calculating eyes. Soldiers moved about, carrying rifles, chatting quietly, seemingly oblivious. But Avery had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. Every glance could be a signal, every casual gesture a test. She moved like a shadow herself, silent, measured, almost invisible. The drill sergeant blew the whistle, and soldiers took their positions. Avery set up at the firing line, her rifle resting against her shoulder. The targets appeared, some moving unpredictably, some appearing and disappearing within seconds. Avery's focus was absolute. Each shot she fired hit precisely where it was supposed to, but a part of her remained aware of the subtle dangers around her. She wasn't just competing against moving targets. She was navigating a minefield of human intentions. After the drill, Avery returned to her barracks with her mind still racing. She was cleaning her rifle again, adjusting the scope meticulously, when she noticed a shadow flicker across the hallway. She turned sharply, catching a glimpse of someone retreating around the corner. Footsteps echoed faintly. Someone was watching her, learning her routine, calculating when and how to interfere. Later that evening, a folded note slid under her door. Avery's name was written in precise block letters. "Not everyone here wants you to succeed. Watch your back." Her eyes scanned the words, her jaw tightening. The note wasn't threatening in the way a shout or a confrontation would be. It was calculated, subtle, designed to make her doubt herself. But Avery didn't flinch. She felt a surge of determination instead. Threats didn't intimidate her, they sharpened her focus. She went over the drill in her mind, recalling every shot, every angle, every movement. There were minor anomalies she hadn't noticed in the heat of the moment. A target that seemed slightly misaligned. A timer that blinked faster than it should have. Someone had tried to sabotage her performance, but they had underestimated her ability to adapt, to stay calm under pressure. Avery made a mental note of each irregularity, storing the details for later analysis. As night fell, the barracks were quiet. Avery sat on her bunk, rifle beside her, notebook open. She began sketching out the range, marking possible angles, noting where someone could have interfered. The calm of the night contrasted sharply with the storm she felt brewing inside the facility. This was no longer just a test of skill. It was a test of awareness, resilience, and strategy. A soft knock at the door made her tense. Avery moved swiftly, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing at the dim light in the hallway. There was no one there, just an empty corridor, silent except for the hum of the lights and the distant murmur of soldiers sleeping. Avery's pulse remained steady, but she made a note. Someone had been in close proximity to her quarters. She didn't know why, but she would be ready next time. She ran through scenarios in her mind. If someone wanted to sabotage her gear again, how would they approach it? When would they act? Avery calculated possibilities with precision, turning potential weaknesses into strategies. Every detail mattered. Every shadow could be a threat. Every whisper in the barracks could contain hidden meaning. The following morning, Avery arrived at the range before anyone else. She set up her rifle, double-checked the scope, and adjusted her ammunition. Her hands moved like clockwork, precise, controlled, deliberate. She wasn't just preparing for the drill, she was preparing for the hidden adversary who had tried to undermine her. Every shot today would be proof, not just of skill, but of awareness. Blake arrived, his demeanor tense. Avery caught the faint flicker of resentment in his eyes. He glanced at her equipment, then quickly looked away, unwilling to meet her gaze. She didn't acknowledge him. Her focus was absolute. Yesterday was a victory, yes, but today would reveal whether she could adapt to sabotage, manipulation, and hidden threats. The drill began, more challenging than the last. Targets moved erratically, some appearing only for milliseconds, others swinging unpredictably. Avery's focus never wavered. Each shot struck precisely where it needed to be. She adapted instantly to every irregularity, every hidden change. The shadows of sabotage did not shake her. After the drill, Avery's suspicions were confirmed. She found subtle signs that someone had attempted to interfere with a target's mechanism. A loose hinge, a slightly skewed plate, small details, almost invisible but enough to throw off an unprepared soldier. Avery smiled faintly. Whoever had tried to undermine her skill had underestimated her vigilance, her patience, and her ability to read the environment. Later in the quiet of the evening, Avery made her rounds of the barracks, checking her gear, observing soldiers, noting subtle changes in routines. Someone was plotting, calculating, testing her, and she would be ready. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm waiting to break. She could feel it not with fear but with clarity. This hidden threat was not just a challenge, it was an opportunity. The night was deep and silent, yet Avery's senses were alive. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of shadow, every distant footstep became data. She lay on her bunk, rifle within reach, eyes open, reviewing every drill, every detail, every irregularity. Whoever had tried to sabotage her would need to be meticulous, and Avery was already 10 steps ahead. The storm of rivalry and hidden threats had begun. The note, the tampered locker, the subtle sabotage, these were all signals. Someone wanted her to fail, to stumble, to show that her skill was flawed. But Avery Monroe didn't stumble. She didn't panic. She adapted, she anticipated, and she turned potential obstacles into preparation. Somewhere in the shadows, someone watched. They noted her habits, her precision, her calm, and they smiled, thinking they could find a weakness. Avery didn't need to see them to know they were there, and she would be ready. Tomorrow, the real challenge would arrive. Not just moving targets or timed drills, but a test of perception, awareness, and resilience. Avery would meet it head-on, calm and prepared as she always had. And as she closed her eyes that night, a faint sense of anticipation coursed through her. The base was no longer just a training facility. It was a battlefield, and she was fully aware of every hidden threat, every calculated move, every whisper of malice. Avery Monroe had survived the first wave, but she knew the storm had only just begun. The sky was a heavy slate gray as Lieutenant Avery Monroe stepped onto the training grounds that morning. Rain began to drizzle, pattering against her jacket and dripping into her hair. The targets had been rearranged overnight, more unpredictable than ever, and the instructors made no effort to hide the fact that this drill was designed to push the top soldiers to their limits. Avery felt a spark of anticipation. She had been waiting for this. Her skills were honed, her mind sharp, and her focus unwavering. Around her, the other soldiers prepared their weapons. Blake's face was tight with frustration, his movements jittery, betraying the stress of constant comparison to her flawless performance. Whispers circulated, "She's still perfect. Can anyone even touch her?" Soldiers watched each other nervously, knowing this drill was different. Mistakes here could cost more than pride, they could cost respect. The whistle blew, sharp and commanding. Targets appeared immediately. Some swinging, some spinning, some partially hidden behind barriers. Visibility was low. The rain blurred outlines, distorted light, and threatened to throw off aim. Many soldiers flinched as water dripped into their eyes, their gloves slicking with moisture. But Avery's hands were steady. Her mind filtered out the chaos, focusing solely on the path of each bullet, the sway of each target, the wind and rain interacting in a complex ballet that only she seemed to understand. Blake fired first. His shots were rushed, wild, scattering around the targets. Each miss widened the chasm between him and Avery. Her eyes followed his movements for a moment, noting the tension in his shoulders and the panic in his posture. Then she turned her attention forward, ignoring him entirely. Her time wasn't for rivalry, it was for precision. The first target appeared at an impossible angle, moving behind a spinning shield. Most soldiers hesitated, calculating, waiting for the optimal moment. Avery fired instinctively. The bullet hit the center of the plate, ringing out clearly, almost audibly separating her from the rest. A murmur rippled along the range. Her skill wasn't just superior, it was mesmerizing, almost preternatural. The drill intensified. Targets appeared simultaneously from different directions, some partially obscured by mist, others bouncing unpredictably in the rain. Avery adjusted, recalculated, fired, each shot flawless. Every soldier else struggled, fumbled, and faltered, their frustration growing as the rain soaked through uniforms and soaked their confidence. Halfway through the drill, a particularly difficult sequence emerged. 3 targets moving in a triangular pattern, some partially behind barriers, some spinning. The instructor called the sequence the impossibility test, reserved only for those considered elite. Most soldiers froze, hesitating, unsure of where to aim first. Avery's eyes narrowed slightly. She felt the rhythm in the chaos, anticipated the trajectories, calculated distances, wind, and timing with razor-sharp clarity. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3, every target hit perfectly. The others stared in disbelief. Blake's panic was visible. His gloved hands trembled, his rifle slid slightly as he aimed. The combination of fear, envy, and self-doubt made his movements sloppy. Avery didn't spare him a glance. Focus was her armor, precision was her weapon. She had already learned that the battlefield wasn't only about skill, it was about control, calm, and the ability to anticipate chaos without hesitation. The drill escalated to its final stage. The gauntlet. Targets moved faster, some disappearing and reappearing in random sequences. Heavy rain blurred sightlines and mud splattered from soldiers' boots. Even a small miscalculation would result in a miss. Most soldiers faltered immediately, unable to keep pace. But Avery's mind was sharp, her instincts finely tuned. She adapted instantly, 1 target, then another and another, eliminating each without error. By now, the rain had turned into a downpour, soaking uniforms, masking visibility, and turning the range into a slippery challenge. Some soldiers slipped, others misfired, and Blake's face was pale with frustration and humiliation. Avery's composure, however, remained unshakable. Each shot rang true, each calculation perfect, each movement deliberate. Her eyes swept across the targets like a hawk hunting prey. The final target popped up, small, distant, swaying violently in the wind and rain. A collective silence fell over the range. Even the instructors leaned forward slightly, impressed by the difficulty of this last challenge. Soldiers whispered that few could ever hit it under these conditions. Avery took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and adjusted her aim with meticulous care. The bullet left her rifle, striking dead center. Silence hung in the air like a held breath, broken only by the distant patter of rain. The commanding officer stepped forward, his usually stoic expression softened with visible approval. "Lieutenant Monroe," he said, voice clear despite the storm, "you've completed the drill flawlessly. Exceptional work. Nobody else even came close." The other soldiers, soaked and defeated, regarded Avery with a mix of awe, envy, and respect. Blake lowered his rifle, jaw clenched, shoulders heavy with humiliation. This wasn't just a drill anymore. It was a statement. Avery had not only mastered the physical challenge but had proven her ability to adapt to chaos and sabotage without losing composure. As the soldiers returned to the barracks, Avery remained behind for a moment, surveying the rain-soaked range. The targets had been cleared, the instructors had left, and the storm had intensified. The air was electric with tension and possibility. Avery sensed it. Someone had been watching more than just her skill. The subtle attempts at sabotage from the previous day had been deliberate, calculated, and she suspected they were just the beginning. Returning to her quarters, Avery methodically dried and cleaned her rifle. Every detail mattered, every nuance of equipment and environment a potential variable for the next challenge. She laid out her ammunition, aligned her scope, checked the barrel for obstructions, and even measured the rain's effect on her rifle's trajectory. Preparation wasn't just habit, it was survival. Later, she observed Blake sulking in the mess hall. The tension between them was palpable, though unspoken. He had tried to undermine her, failed spectacularly, and now seemed unsure how to proceed. His envy simmered, a quiet storm that Avery could sense even at a distance. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken, louder than any words ever could. Night fell over the base. Avery lay on her bunk, rain still tapping on the roof, reflecting on the day's events. She had dominated the drill, outperformed every soldier, and remained calm under extreme pressure. But she knew the danger wasn't over. The hidden adversary who had tampered with her locker, watched her at night, and left subtle threats was still present. Avery closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them, her resolve sharp as a blade. Somewhere in the shadows, someone made notes, studied her habits, and planned the next move. They were waiting for the perfect moment to challenge her again. But Avery Monroe was ready. She had faced mockery, sabotage, and chaos, and she had emerged victorious every time. The storm was only intensifying, and tomorrow would bring a new test, one that would demand not only skill but strategy, anticipation, and resilience. The base was alive with hidden tensions, subtle rivalries, and unspoken threats. Soldiers whispered in the halls, glances were exchanged, and the sense of competition hung thick in the air. Avery felt it all, every beat, every subtle movement, every hidden intention, and she welcomed it. She knew this. Precision, patience, and awareness were her greatest weapons, and she intended to use them relentlessly, without hesitation. Outside, the rain had turned to a steady downpour. Water ran in rivulets across the range, reflecting the dim lights of the facility. Avery glanced toward the horizon, sensing eyes on her, aware of every shadow, anticipating every move. She didn't fear it. She thrived on it. The elite drill was complete, but the real battle, the one for control, respect, and survival, had only just begun, and Avery Monroe would meet it head-on. The storm was coming, and she was ready. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the training ground slick with rain and streaked with puddles. Lieutenant Avery Monroe walked across the mud-streaked terrain with measured steps, boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. Her rifle was slung over her shoulder, its weight familiar and grounding. The elite drill had pushed every soldier to their limits, yet even as others struggled to recover, Avery felt an electric sense of anticipation. Today promised new challenges, subtler, more dangerous, tests that would not just measure skill but character. The barracks were quiet, almost eerily so, as Avery approached the training line. Most soldiers lingered, nursing bruised egos and soaked uniforms. Blake avoided her gaze, scowling as he adjusted his gloves, still bitter from yesterday's humiliation. Avery ignored him. She didn't need confrontation. Her performance had already done the talking. Her attention was drawn elsewhere. A figure approached from the far side of the field, moving deliberately, silently. Unlike Blake's noisy, frantic movements, this soldier exuded calm, a quiet confidence that Avery recognized immediately. This was not a rival to mock or dismiss. This was a competitor who could match precision with skill, poise with strategy. Avery's eyes narrowed slightly as the figure stepped into the light. Corporal Elena Cruz, a veteran trainee, had a reputation for subtle brilliance. She rarely spoke, rarely drew attention, but when she acted, her movements were flawless. Whispers had circulated that she was almost impossible to beat in any skill-based challenge. Avery had noticed the glances exchanged earlier, the unspoken understanding among the top performers that Cruz was someone to watch. Today, Avery would meet her head-on. The drill sergeant blew the whistle, signaling the start of the day's exercise. The mission was different, a combination of sharpshooting, tactical movement, and environmental awareness. Targets appeared at unpredictable intervals, some moving laterally, others partially obscured behind obstacles. The rain had left the range slippery, creating new challenges for balance and accuracy. Blake fired first, as usual, the panic in his movements evident. Missed shots ricocheted harmlessly against the range walls. Avery didn't glance at him. She focused on the first target, taking a measured breath. Her shot hit perfectly. The second followed, then the third. Each movement was deliberate, each shot precise, as though she were conducting a symphony with her rifle. Cruz moved with a predator's grace. She didn't speak, didn't call attention to herself, but her precision was undeniable. Shots rang out one after the other, hitting targets dead center. Avery noted the subtle differences in technique, the angle of Cruz's stance, the almost imperceptible adjustments to aim based on wind and motion. This was a rival who wouldn't falter, a silent threat to any who underestimated her. The drill escalated. Targets moved faster, the angles became trickier, and some appeared for mere seconds before vanishing. Avery and Cruz mirrored each other's skill, a silent duel unfolding with bullets as their conversation. Other soldiers watched in awe, their murmurs subdued by the intensity of the exchange. The two women were locked in a battle of precision, focus, and mental fortitude. Blake, in contrast, struggled to maintain composure. His shots were wild, his hands slick with sweat. He realized more clearly than ever that skill alone wasn't enough. Calm, awareness, and anticipation were just as vital. And in that moment, he understood why Avery dominated. She wasn't just skilled, she was unshakable. Midway through the drill, a new obstacle appeared, a moving target concealed behind a rotating barrier. Soldiers had to track it, anticipate the spin, and fire with impeccable timing. Avery's eyes narrowed. Cruz adjusted subtly, aligning her shot perfectly. Avery mirrored her movements, synchronizing with the target, her fingers tightening gently on the trigger. Both shots rang true at the exact same instant. The sound echoed across the range, a sharp punctuation that left the other soldiers silent. The drill sergeant's voice cut through the tension. "Excellent. Both of you are executing at the highest level. Observe and learn everyone else." His tone carried respect, but also a warning. The silent duel between Avery and Cruz was beyond ordinary competition. After the drill, Avery and Cruz walked back toward the barracks, silently acknowledging each other with a nod. There was no animosity, only recognition. Each knew the other was a formidable opponent. Avery sensed the subtle challenge in Cruz's calm demeanor, a quiet test to measure not just skill, but strategy, patience, and adaptability. Later in the barracks, whispers swirled. Soldiers speculated about the rivalry, casting uneasy glances at both women. Blake's resentment deepened. He had been the one to mock, to belittle, and now found himself powerless in the shadow of their combined prowess. Avery felt a surge of clarity. She needed to respect Cruz, study her techniques, anticipate her strategies. In this environment, allies and rivals were not always clear-cut. Survival demanded both caution and insight. A sudden knock at Avery's door broke her concentration. She moved with practiced speed, rifle in hand. No one answered when she called. The hallway was empty, silent except for the distant hum of activity in the barracks. Avery's pulse remained steady. This was the base she knew, the one where subtle threats and careful observation were constant. She made a mental note: someone had been close. Again. The evening passed quietly, but Avery's mind was restless. She reviewed the drill in her notebook, noting every detail: the speed of targets, angles, her own movements, and the subtle strategies she had noticed in Cruz. She couldn't dismiss the silent competition as mere chance. It was a calculated challenge, a test of skill, awareness, and mental resilience. Blake's presence lingered in the background. He avoided confrontation but studied Avery relentlessly, his envy simmering beneath the surface. Avery had long since learned that some rivals were subtle, operating in shadows, using observation rather than aggression. Blake was more predictable, but he remained a potential complication. Avery rose from her bunk, checking her rifle one last time before sleep. Every component was aligned, cleaned, and calibrated. Every detail mattered. Tomorrow promised new challenges, ones that would test not only her skill but her ability to anticipate sabotage, subtle interference, and the unpredictable moves of both visible and unseen rivals. Somewhere in the barracks, Cruz's presence was a silent reminder of the stakes. Not every threat was overt. Some were calculated, patient, waiting for the precise moment to strike. Avery welcomed it. A worthy rival sharpened focus, demanded innovation, and reminded her that complacency was the enemy. As Avery lay on her bunk, listening to the distant hum of the bass, her thoughts traced every move, every shot, every subtle nuance of the day. She knew she had survived another round of the storm, but the real test was evolving. Rivals, hidden threats, and subtle sabotage would intensify, and only those who anticipated, adapted, and executed flawlessly would prevail. The night air pressed against the windows, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and gunpowder. Avery's mind was alert, processing every piece of information, calculating strategies for the unknown. The storm of rivalry and hidden challenges was far from over. It was only growing stronger, more unpredictable, more dangerous. And somewhere in the shadows, someone watched both Avery and Cruz, silently nodding every action, every precision shot, every hint of strategy. They were preparing for the next move, unaware that they were only sharpening Avery's focus further. The silent rivalry was no longer just a test of skill. It was a game of awareness, anticipation, and endurance. Avery Monroe thrived in it. Tomorrow, the challenge would escalate. The unseen adversaries, the subtle sabotage, and the hidden pressures would all converge. But Avery was ready. She always was. The storm had shifted. The rivals were now clear, the threats visible and invisible, and Avery Monroe stood poised at the center of it all. And somewhere beyond the shadows, someone muttered, "She's extraordinary, but we'll see how she handles the next wave." Avery didn't flinch. She never did. The battlefield was evolving, and she was prepared. The dawn was unusually still, the base bathed in the soft golden light of early morning. Lieutenant Avery Monroe tightened the straps of her rifle, scanning the range with methodical precision. Every drill, every sabotage, every rival had led to this moment. The instructors called it the final showdown, a test unlike any other, designed to push even the most elite soldiers to their absolute limits. The mist clung to the grounds, distorting vision, masking movements. Avery knew this was intentional. Every challenge so far had prepared her not just for skill, but for unpredictability. Every step she took was calculated. Her mind ran through scenarios, anticipating sabotage, false targets, hidden observers, and the unpredictable strategies of her rivals. From the shadows, Corporal Elena Cruz emerged. Silent, composed, and deadly accurate. Avery nodded briefly. Respect had grown between them. Rivalry had transformed into mutual acknowledgement. Together, they had survived extreme tests, adapted to sabotage, and proven themselves under psychological pressure. But today, only one could be the unquestioned victor. The whistle blew sharply, signaling the start. A complex series of targets appeared simultaneously, moving erratically, some partially hidden behind rotating barriers. Visibility was minimal. Rain had returned in a steady drizzle, slicking the ground, masking footprints, and threatening balance. Most soldiers faltered immediately, but Avery and Cruz moved as if the chaos had been choreographed for them. The first sequence tested adaptability. Targets appeared at random, some moving too fast for most to track, others appearing briefly behind fogged glass panels. Avery's eyes narrowed, calculating angles, distances, wind, and reflections. Shots rang out with deadly precision. Cruz mirrored her movements, neither faltering, neither conceding. The duel was silent but ferocious, every bullet a statement, every movement a declaration of skill and awareness. Then the sabotage began. A series of small mechanical disruptions shifted target positions unpredictably. Barriers tilted slightly, timers reset without warning, and decoys appeared among real targets. Most soldiers panicked, missing opportunities, losing focus. Avery noticed instantly. Each irregularity was subtle, deliberate, a challenge designed to test perception and adaptability. She adjusted seamlessly, every shot striking true. Blake, observing from the sidelines, clenched his fists. His earlier arrogance had evaporated in the face of Avery's precision and calm. He knew he could never match her under such pressure, but Avery didn't notice him. Her focus was absolute. The drill intensified. Targets moved unpredictably, some only visible through reflective surfaces. Alarms and simulated explosions created sensory overload. Avery adapted instantly, integrating sound, movement, and reflection into her calculation. Cruz maintained the same calm, deadly focus. The silent duel escalated, each shot a measure of nerve, strategy, and skill. Midway through the course, Avery faced the most challenging sequence, the Triad Challenge. 3 targets appeared simultaneously at extreme angles, moving at different speeds. The rain made footing treacherous. A split second of hesitation could mean a miss. Avery inhaled, exhaled, and fired, first one, then another, then the third. All 3 struck dead center. Cruz fired simultaneously. The synchronization between them was uncanny, a silent acknowledgement of each other's mastery. Most soldiers were frozen, unable to comprehend such precision. Even the instructors, hardened veterans of countless drills, exchanged impressed glances. Then came the final sabotage, the shadow target. Hidden, reflective, and almost invisible against the fog and rain, it moved erratically, designed to deceive, misdirect, and force mistakes. Soldiers had failed this challenge before. Avery's instincts screamed that this was more than a test of marksmanship. It was a test of perception, patience, and mental clarity. She studied the environment, ignoring distractions. A subtle flicker caught her eye, a shadow that didn't match the pattern of the moving barriers. She adjusted, fired, and the bullet hit its mark. Silence fell over the range. The shadow target had been neutralized. Cruz completed the sequence moments later. Avery approached her, acknowledging her skill with a nod. There was no animosity, only mutual respect. They had both faced every challenge, every sabotage, every hidden threat, and emerged unbroken. The commanding officer stepped forward, rain dripping from his uniform, expression solemn yet approving. "Lieutenant Monroe, Corporal Cruz, your performance today is unparalleled. You have completed the final showdown flawlessly. Every other soldier observe. Excellence is not just skill, it is awareness, adaptability, and composure under pressure." Blake's face was pale with humiliation. His earlier mockery had failed to intimidate, and now his frustration was a visible storm. Avery felt no satisfaction in this. Her victories had never been about others' humiliation. They were about preparation, focus, and mastering the impossible. The instructors dismissed the other soldiers. Avery and Cruz remained behind, cleaning their rifles, reviewing the course, noting every subtle detail. Every disruption, every irregularity, every psychological stressor had been cataloged and analyzed. Both women understood the real lesson. Survival was not just about skill. It was about observation, anticipation, and adaptability. As Avery returned to her bunk, she felt a sense of completion but also clarity. The hidden threats, the sabotage, the silent rivalries, they had all been overcome. Her focus, discipline, and composure had seen her through the most extreme tests the facility could devise. Blake avoided eye contact, slouched in defeat, a quiet acknowledgement of his inferiority. The other soldiers whispered, finally recognizing her as the undeniable leader in skill and precision. Avery didn't gloat. She had earned respect through action, not words. That night Avery reflected on her journey. From the initial mockery through sabotage, rivalry, and the psychological pressures of each drill, she had not only survived but thrived. Every challenge had sharpened her skills, honed her instincts, and strengthened her resolve. The base was silent except for the distant hum of activity. Avery lay on her bunk, rifle beside her, mind calm, alert, and ready. She knew that in the real world challenges would be more complex than drills. Deception, sabotage, and hidden threats existed beyond controlled environments. But today had proven one thing: she could anticipate, adapt, and conquer any obstacle. Somewhere in the shadows, observers had been watching, taking notes, and learning. Avery sensed their scrutiny but was unafraid. She had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious. The storm of rivalry and sabotage had been weathered. Her skill, focus, and composure had been proven. As she closed her eyes, a sense of peace settled over her. The drills, the sabotage, the hidden challenges, they had tested every limit, every weakness, every doubt, and Avery Monroe had overcome them all. Tomorrow there would be new challenges. Life would always demand vigilance, awareness, and precision. But for now, she had achieved mastery, not just over the drills, but over fear, doubt, and chaos. And somewhere in the quiet of the barracks, a note was left under her door. Exceptional, we see you, Lieutenant Monroe. The real world will test you even harder. Be ready. Avery didn't flinch. She never did. She had survived mockery, sabotage, psychological pressure, rivalries, and the ultimate test of skill. She was ready for anything the world could throw at her. The storm had passed. The battlefield, for now, was calm. But Lieutenant Avery Monroe knew one thing for certain. She would face the next challenge with the same precision, composure, and unbreakable focus that had carried her through every trial. She was unstoppable.